All right, so Charles Blow been on this whole reverse migration thing for a little while. One of the, it's a few primary things that we have to recognize as to why Black Americans decided to uproot from the South and go down into the Northeast, to the Midwest, and to the West. The South was a very racial place. This is Charles Blow, by the way. The South was a very racial place who pretty much advocated against advocated a culture against Black Americans, right? We had between what 1882 and 1968, we had what 3,500 lynchings alone, right? So it just spreaded a culture that pretty much caused a lot of domestic fighting, um, with the assumption of the buildup of a culture of white power that's been steady until most recent times, right? So let's go to Charles Blow. Let's hear him talking about this whole reverse migration thing because is it a good thing for us to go back to the South? Is it not? Let's hear him talk about it.
The trend of black people relocating from major northern and western cities to suburbs or to the south has accelerated over the past decade. U.S. Census data shows that 9 out of 10 cities with the highest concentrations of black residents have experienced substantial population declines in those black communities over the past 20 years. This reverse migration holds especially true for the city of Chicago. In 1980, about 40% of Chicago's population was black, but as of 2020, the black community has only accounts for 29% of Chicago's residents. This shrinkage stands in contrast to the black people who surged into the city during the Great Migration. Former Chicago residents have cited crime and increase in cost of living, policing unfavorable to black communities, and systemic racism as their rationale for relocating. Joining us to discuss is Professor of History and African American Studies at Georgetown, Marcia Chatlin. Professor Chatlin, what is your take on what is happening in these cities, particularly in Chicago?
Well, one of the things we have to keep in mind when we look at Chicago is the fact that in the late 1990s, they adopted a plan to reduce the impact of public housing on the city and sent people through the voucher system who were scattered throughout the city. Some had left for other parts of the Midwest. So we have the decline of public housing, as well as the loss of jobs, the lack of services, and the closing of many neighborhood and local schools that were central to galvanizing communities. And so the shifts that we see in Chicago, I think, are emblematic of the post 1980, um, pinch on Black communities and Black people who were searching for better quality of life and lower cost of living in other places.
So in 1980s, what she's talking about is the ending of the Reagan era, where a whole lot of social programs was cut, primarily from the black community, and you also seen this whole aspect with regard on the war on drugs. I did the take on the war on drugs, a beginning take on the war on drugs when it comes to the Reagan era and how the culture of the Reagan era was shaped, the mindset that was ideal at that time for the Reagan administration to pretty much, you know, set its policy agenda with regards to that. That video is called The Power Three. Check it out. I'll probably pick it up in a link afterwards. However, this culture that is currently going on, what we got to recognize is that first and foremost, again, I will always go back to it was always about opportunities. The difference between this video, which I think was done 4 years ago under the Biden administration, is that you have to recognize that a lot of manufacturing jobs are coming back to the United States because these manufacturing jobs are leaving places like China, India, all these other nations who was allowed to get the outsourcing of American jobs. So opportunities is going to be necessarily everywhere, probably except in a lot of states like the Southeast. I mean, excuse me, the Southwest. Places like Los Angeles, places like San Diego, unless You working in the boating industry, some type of military grade industry, to where you're building warplanes, warships, and things like that for people like Lockheed, McDonnell Douglas, Boeing, or something like that. It's going to be hard to get a job, and even it's hard to get uh, IT jobs or computer science jobs when it comes to Silicon Valley. A lot of those individuals getting hired. I mean, excuse me, fired. So think about this before you decide on moving back down to the South, because this video was done 4 years ago. Like I said, it was under the Biden administration. But now that all these jobs are getting sourced back to America, isn't necessarily important for us to move back down south. What's the importance of us moving back down south? If it is it just for political power?
So this shift comes at, there are multiple, I make this argument, there are multiple great migrations happening all at the same time. One is a reverse migration of white people out of the burbs and back into the cities. Mostly young college educated white kids are moving back into the city centers. That, these things overlap. So that puts housing pressure on existing families, existing communities, makes it more expensive to live there. But also very often politicians, police forces see these new young white faces in neighborhoods and they want to make them feel safe and protected. And so they swarm in with more policing on the existing communities. So what?
A lot of what I liked about the culture in earlier times when I was coming up, right? When you had these after school programs, I know they had died down when I was a young fella myself, right? But when you had these after school programs, you did have a lot of school programs to keep the youth up out of trouble, right? It was something besides sports. A lot of times sports have taken on the mechanism that the primary thing that the individual will get into if they wanted to keep their kids out of trouble. You got things like karate and stuff as well, though, right? But it took more emphasis in the school programs than you have in search of probably going. A lot of times the digital world is taking on the perspective of being that after school program to where all your kids want to do is sit on a computer. Kids are a lot more active back in the day with regards to being outside. But the social programs that got taken away from the uh, black community in terms of the Reagan era, you could just see the difference where kids would travel state to state, you know, just to be able to you know be involved in activities that was productive. I would like to see a lot of that come back, instead of this those type of programs being cut from the community to where we are not able to keep kids and the youth active to activate more of an enlightenment of their possibilities in life.
What do you think is the interplay overall about what is going to happen in the next decade or two or three around racial compositions of city centers?
Well, what we're going to see is the continued growth of the racial and ethnic diversity in the suburbs. This idea as the suburbs meaning white is no longer true in so many parts of the country. And I think that our political parties have yet to catch up with it in the ways that we put the broad brush of suburban to mean white. So that's going to be the first one. I think the second thing we're going to see in parts of the country that have limited housing stock, like Washington, D.C., where I live, is the continued move of gentrification. And as long as real estate becomes the investment vehicle for white people with wealth, we're going to see this incredibly hot housing market. And the thing that I'm really worried about is something that I witnessed as a Chicagoan growing up during those years of the reverse migration, where Black people will go to cities that have lower costs of living, but will then find themselves in a housing market and a rental market that is overheated, as we've seen already, and they'll see themselves moving to cities that are having economic opportunities based on the service industry, and these are industries that are sometimes very unstable during times of economic crisis. And so there'll be a lot of vulnerability for those Black reverse migrants. And I think we saw a lot of that in the 1990s and early 2000s in places like Atlanta, Las Vegas, and Dallas, where the economies, when they're strong, they work for Black folks. But the second there's any kind of shift in the economic structure, Black people are the first people to feel it.
Right. You know what I'm saying? So if this is why I bring that up, that it's more important with regards to opportunity. Instead of going down south to conjure up political power, because I could tell you right now, in the city of Los Angeles, you got hotels to where it's membership only, to where you have to pay a $5,000 a month bill, even if you're not going to stay in that particular hotel for any period of that month. A bill is still going to come to you for $5,000 in order for you to be a membership, have a membership to stay in that hotel when you're in this particular city. And these hotels spread out through all the United States. So no matter where you go throughout the United States, your memberships gives you some ability to have residency at that hotel for that particular night. So here we are. We're worried about power, right? When it don't matter if you're in a state or excuse me, it don't matter what state you in. You're going to find some type of way around the whole ideology when it comes to power, because in these hotels, these memberships, these individuals are vetted about with regards to who they are. First of all, they got to have some type of money in order for them to get in, because ordinarily people with a lot more higher income likes to get in, like gets in a lot less trouble. I'm not saying everybody, of course. However, there is a type of aura that comes with living in these uh, membership only hotels. And now you're going to find out that probably not in this video that you still, like she said, you have white people trying to do reverse migration as well. I'm gonna bring up a video. It's not gonna be in this video, but I'm gonna bring up a video to where you're gonna find that not only are blacks, remigrating to the south, but also whites, and it's for different reasons. Like I said, when I noticed individuals going back down south, I know it. I noticed it for the economic benefits of the South. Like these corporations that's buying up all these lots and stuff like that has been buying up all this housing, these single family housing, and then renting them out uh, has had to stop in most recent times. We can see how the dynamics will change with these new policies under the Trump administration that prevents these corporations from buying up single family homes and keeping the residents or the citizens of all these different states as being renters. We need to see the effects of that, because one thing's for sure, a service based job does not keep you in secured employment. Manufacturing jobs do. Like I said, we will have to keep up with what's going on in the Trump administration before you can honestly say, I'm gonna up and pack my bags and move down south simply for these individuals to have a vote, primarily a Democratic vote.
So speaking of Atlanta, I live now in Atlanta. Is a big recipient of reverse migrants from the north and west, but the Atlanta metro area is, but the city of Atlanta not so much. So the 2020 census, Atlanta finally loses its majority black designation. It is now, the black population has now fallen below 50% for the first time since 1970. So even in places that are receiving these reverse migrants, it is they're going out into suburban spaces rather than congregating in the center of city. Then what we see in the center of city in Atlanta is the influx of young white residents. What does all of this suburbanization of blackness mean for political power?
Well, what we're going to see are instances like we saw in Chicago recently, where there is a real power struggle about districting. The ward system in Chicago has allowed for a lot of the political victories we saw with the first Black mayor, Harold Washington, and a young Barack Obama. And so
Man, she could say it just plain and simple that man, black people are. I mean, this black people are suffering just as much as white people, when white people are suffering just as much as black people in terms of the economy. The United States has basically turned itself into a service oriented, corporation into where the manufacturing and everything is being built outside of the United States. And like she said, these service jobs are a lot more volatile when it comes to secured employment, something that you can retire with, something that you can actually build a legacy with, and buying a home, purchasing a home, and doing all this other stuff. When it comes to actually feeling secure in an environment, so it doesn't matter whether you move to what state you want to move to. It's all about that securement for individuals to want to assert political power and say that we should all move down south when you're not providing opportunities for us to move down south, um, like like they're saying right here. Um, you're going to find yourself going down south uh, and not feeling secure. Then, like a whole lot of people that I know, end up wanting to move back.
I think that there are going to be more and more claims of redistricting, the needing to shift for racial balance. And I think that the people who are going to feel it the most are the Black and brown children who are now in school systems that never anticipated their presence. And we're going to also see the question of what kind of services are going to be available in these suburbs in terms of transportation and jobs, if there is a sense that the city center, as it gets wider, is the most important part for investment.
And are we seeing a rise, a new form of segregation? Many of these big urban cities, New York, Chicago, what have you, have tremendous segregation issues with, both within the cities and also as a result in their public school systems. Is there a threat that that segregation is on the rise and becomes a threat to the well-being of community, particularly Black communities?
Well, I think we've always seen segregation as at the center of the Black experience. What I am afraid of is that as we have an erosion of a Black middle class, we have an erosion of a tax base. And we know that so many of our politicians respond to this idea that taxpayers, in terms of property owners, in terms of people who earn high incomes, are the ones that they listen to. And so I think what we're going to see is greater social stratification and fewer ways for poor Black communities to assert themselves politically. And when they're kind of brought into these suburban structures, structures that were designed to starve tax revenues from cities, I think we're going to see incredible reversals in terms of taxation as well as development projects. And so this is a critical issue. And, out, if you're going to run for office in the next 10 to 15 years, please pay attention to this electorate, because as much as the political parties are obsessed with white working class voters, they've completely lost sight of the fact that the suburbs have new populations that can also be galvanized politically for the greater good.
Yeah, I think that ultimately it's the individual choice. Like for instance, if you're doing better in the city, right? The city is hustle, bustle, and bustle. If you're young, um, ready to get out here and make a living for yourself in terms of I'm trying to make a way, like I'm trying to be entrepreneurial and stuff like that, I would choose the city over a suburban area anytime because in the South, you got a lot more space. And most definitely, I believe that for those individuals who actually want to reverse migrate, I think it's better for the retirement community, people who have been in these jobs for a long time and who are, looking for a bigger lot to live on, probably to get out of the city and slow down life a little bit more. But I'm not gonna go down south to go live in another city when the environment of the city. You have to know your surroundings of the city that you ultimately live in. You don't want to go into a city and you walk right into something that you don't know. It's cool for you to go out there and purchase a house. That's one thing, but purchase a house in the suburban area, that is. But purchase a house in the city, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be a renter, and that is not necessarily a good idea in terms of security. Then you have to think about the employment and jobs. You know what I'm saying? It's better when you're trying to, you know, be about your grind, be youthful, be about your hustle or bustle. You always gonna go where you're able to best navigate into your entrepreneurial aspects of getting what you want out of your business done, which is ultimately a profit. And then you would like to say, like, okay, well, now I can make moves. That's my theory about how I would go about it. I don't care about voting for who, what, nothing. Because at the end of the day, as an individual, I had to take care of myself. Now, what you did see in Chicago that they was providing individuals with vouchers, which ultimately moved them out these neighborhoods because that's what I wanted to bring up as well. Okay, if you wanted us to move down south, then how? Why don't you pay for us to move down south? If you trying to assert political powers in terms of you know black culture, black policies, or things like that, why don't you have make a deliberate effort on your own to actually ensure that we uh, move into these areas and not only move into these areas but move into these areas and have a better form of living. I don't know how them individuals who move with regards to that voucher program once they moved from down south ultimately came out, so I can't say. But who wants to depend on social programs? That is really not the American way. You know what I'm saying? Who wants to sit up there and not go after life? I'm an individual. I like to live life, bro. And to live life, I like to get out here and I like to get my bag. Tiny Cross-H.U.G on the Trumped Up Live Show, man. Always remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. The move down south is up to you, whether white or black. This political agenda thing, it's all about the individual. We are here in America, we are a shared community, whether you like it or not. Like it or not, it's good that it be a soldier.